Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly, and we're back with another Central Virginia fishing report with Ethan Martin at TaleTellers Fly Shop. How you doing, Ethan?
I'm doing good today. How are you doing?
Just trying to stay out of trouble as always. Took a quick look at your weather, and it's hot today, which we're recording this on Monday, but it's getting ready to cool off, and it looks like you're going to probably get some rain. You got thunderstorms in the forecast in the next, week to 10 days.
Yeah, it should be decent, for the smaller streams, because we had that big, huge slug of rain a week and a half ago now, and so that made everything shoot up. So we're still kind of on the drop off from that. So, the evening thunderstorms, it just depends on how much rain we get, because a lot of them can be so local, that it doesn't always have a huge impact on the bigger rivers, but local rivers it could. So it's just all a guessing game, sadly,
Yeah, and also, too, sometimes those showers don't overwhelm the trees and the grass, and they can suck most of that water up. But, to your point, if it's a little bit more than that, sometimes it overwhelms things and the river's going to come up.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the thing that people a lot of times don't realize or think about, is just how much water all of the trees and grass and bushes and all that stuff takes. So, we got that huge amount of rain, but then even some of our small streams within 2 days were, back to not the exact flow as what they were before, but still pretty low. And so it made the trout fishing actually a little better and, safe to do. But yeah, it definitely blew out the river for fishing smallmouth for a little bit, but we're back in it now. So I know quite a few guys that have been out, today and this past weekend that did pretty well. So it's definitely a time to get out and enjoy some sunshine, until depending on what this rain does tomorrow.
Yeah, and so obviously, if your water is up in the smallmouth rivers and it's a little bit stained and it's cooling off, how does that affect how your strategy for the day? Do you end up pulling streamers early, or are the fish still pretty consistently looking up?
For me, I'm going to probably start throwing frogs or bait fish on top just because that's what I like to do. And so it just depends on the day and where you're at. Because typically as the water gets lower, you're going to find more topwater action just because that's kind of the nature of the game. There's less water for the fish to have to rise up to eat whatever that thing is. But, I'm always going to start with, especially this time of year, with like a topwater frog pattern or a bait fish that's staying higher in the water column. Just because I like seeing the fish come eat it. It's not always the best pattern to throw. But if you're like me and you like actually seeing the fish come up and take the thing, then that's a good place to start. And then I usually just kind of progress through the water column through the day. So, if they're not eating a ton, then you can throw on an intermediate line in like a Murdich minnow or like a Lefty's Deceiver, some sort of unweighted pattern. And the intermediate lines do a really good job of that. And one of the things too, as the summer gets more intense, is I end up using like a saltwater intermediate a lot of times. That's one of the questions people ask a lot about when it comes to the fly lines, is if your fly line's getting all gummy as we get into these like more warm days, like today, and it's like 94 out. And so if you're out floating the river today, it's highly possible that if you've just got a typical trout fly line, that thing is going to get all gummy and just not feel like it's casting right. But that's why I got a couple fly lines. So I'll usually put on like a saltwater intermediate or some other style. Even like the bass bug, Scientific Angler's bass bug has a warm coating on it. So it's just little things like that you keep in mind. And just keep plugging away at the banks. And I think that's another thing too, that a lot of people, you get out on a bigger river, like when you go over the James, it is a bigger river, and a lot of people get overwhelmed by that. And so if you're doing like you put in the downtown and you float the 9 mile stretch to Joshua Falls, well, you just focus on pounding the banks, or just kind of minimize the river in your mind and focus on fishing shade line, especially on bright days, and putting that fly as close to the bank as you can get it. And if there's a fish around, you're going to have a higher chance. Rather than just like today, we drove over and I saw a group of kayakers that were in the straight middle of the James, which is pretty wide. I'm at the section they were at, pretty wide, being probably 100 yards football field. And they were casting just from the middle of the river. And I know that section well, and I know that is just like no man's land. So when you are going out and you are fishing the bigger rivers through the summer, it's just one of those things to focus on structure, and like all that stuff is still important. It's very rare that you're going to see a fish just chilling out in the middle of essentially a desert. So yeah, that's just one of the other things to keep in mind as we do these summer floats and get closer into that, because fish, they like the shade. There's food closer to the bank, and they don't have eyelids. So if it's super bright out, we're sitting around squinting, putting on sunglasses, and the only thing they can do is go and sit in the shade. So just another helpful little tip.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, I think this has almost run its course now, but, just for the crazy, curious people, no Broodex in Central Virginia, right?
No, there is not any Broodex. And I've been asked that so many times because, and to be honest, I don't know what it was about this year's cicada hatch, because, last year we had 17 years and a little bit more south of us, about an hour from Central Virginia. So, we fished them, and I told people about them. But this year it seems to be way more people had a piqued interest about it. And I guess it's probably just was over more heavily populated areas. But we will still get our annual cicadas. So the ones that are like a white and olive look to them. And I haven't heard any here yet in Central Virginia. I heard some. I was at the Bay this past weekend. I did hear a couple there. So, it's only probably the next week or two where we're going to start hearing those. And that's a pretty good food source as well for smallmouth. Usually is an indicator that topwater fishing is going to be good. Doesn't necessarily mean, that they're sitting around all day eating annual cicadas. But it does mean typically that's just summertime. We get low flows and topwater work. So just something else to keep in mind.
Got it. And I guess, on the trout game, cooling off and a little bit more water is maybe giving people an opportunity, if they're careful with the temperature, to still go out and, chase brook trout up high.
Yeah, for sure. And so with that, we do have a couple streams that they seem to stay cooler than others. And so the guys that I know that have been fishing that, it's been just starting into the terrestrial game. So, like ant patterns or beetle patterns have done well, just because they kind of are generic enough to look like anything. Because brook trout aren't too picky, but there are little things that matter, like the subtle changes in size. If they're coming up just swiping at your dry fly, then you can downsize one. And a pattern I throw a lot this time of the year is Egan's the bionic ant is what it's called, just because it kind of looks like a big host of different things. And then a lot of times I'll run a dropper off that, just depending on, if it's more shallow and I keep getting the dropper hung up, then I'll just chop it off, or I'll throw 2 dry flies. But I still, pretty much the whole summer, I like a big bushy dry fly that's going to be able to support a nymph of some kind. And then that's where I start, and then as the day progresses, I'll kind of go around from there. And in my taste, a big bushy dry fly is going to be like a size 10 or size 12. And that's pretty much where I'm going to start. And then for some people, that's mind boggling that a brook trout will eat that, but they do very, very readily. And again, I'm not always throwing that 100% of the time. But I just like throwing big flies because I'm blind and I like to be able to see them.
Yeah, it works out better that way. And also, as things are getting hotter and the stream levels are dropping, it's also, probably a good thing to remind people to keep an eye out for our legless friends.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's something I never hear people talk about, is the good old snakes and things that will come out and, sun on the rocks and that sort of stuff. Some streams seem to have more snakes than others. But, just be careful with where you step, and I just wouldn't be mindlessly running through the forest. Stepping over a log, make sure that there's not a little cottonmouth or something on the inside. A guy I know who comes in the shop, he might listen to this. I just found out, I hadn't seen him in a little while, and I was wondering where he was at. And I guess last fall he was walking in there was a snake that had been just hanging in some leaves and came up and whacked him pretty good in the leg, and it messed him up a little bit. Wasn't able to walk for a little bit as a cottonmouth. So yeah, just something to be mindful of, because that's the last thing anybody wants to deal with in good old summer.
Yeah, amen. And folks, we love questions on the articulate fly. You can email them to us or send them to us on our Facebook or Instagram page. If we use your question, I'll send you some articulate fly swag, and we're going to enter you into a drawing for something cool from the shop at the end of the season. And Ethan, before I let you hop, why don't you let folks know shop hours, location, and all that kind of good stuff?
Yeah, so we're located in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia. That's where the store is at. That's where we ship everything out at. And then if you can't find us there, you can't make it down, then you can find us online at TaleTellers VA. And we pretty much have everything online that we have in the store as well. And, we're adding to that all the time. And if you just want to keep up with kind of our everyday shenanigans, then Instagram or Facebook is a good option. And you can find us there at TaleTellers VA, like Virginia is the Instagram handle, and then just TaleTellers Fly Shop is the Facebook page. So either of those are great options just for kind of keeping up on the daily news.
Well, there you go. Well, listen, folks, great time of the year to get out there and catch a few. Tight lines, everybody. Tight lines, Ethan.
Tight lines.